Welcome, everyone, to the Games People Play with Bernie Corbett. I remain Bernie Corbett here once again, and welcome to Season 1. And we're all the way to Episode 11 of the Games People Play. And we've certainly had some fun presenting our program over the first couple of months. Once again, we are at our home, away from home. Actually, it is our home here on the second floor of the Four Sports Bar and Restaurant, 166 Canal Street in Boston. Right across from the TD Garden. Boston Bruins are in the Stanley Cup playoffs, not at the TD Garden. They are in distant Edmonton right now in the NHL bubble, but we're keeping the spirit alive with the Games People Play here. And thank you, as always, to Peter Colton and all of our friends here at the Fours, voted by Sports Illustrated, the #1 sports bar and restaurant in America. Very special guest with us today, and I guess to open, I have to say it's not often that you have a guest who can certainly say with a good deal of pride and emphasis and confidence that they are the best there ever was at whatever they happen to do. I always think of Roy Hobbs in the Natural as the best there ever was, but we have that type of individual, not just on the field, but we're going to talk about what he has done off the field. From the time that he was participating in the National Football League and obviously the time that he spent now in retirement and beyond. With us is Anthony Munoz, and really to start, I would say arguably, or maybe not arguably, the greatest of all time for the National Football League at his position of tackle, and certainly rated as an offensive lineman overall. And just quickly to remind everybody, need they be reminded, 11-time Pro Bowler from 1981 to 1991, tied with Tom Mack for the most Pro Bowl selections at the offensive line position. Tom Mack was a guard with the LA Rams. 9-time All-Pro, a first-teamer, and was the Offensive Lineman of the Year in 1981 and 1988. In 1994, he was selected to the 75th anniversary all-time team of the NFL, all-decade for the 80s, of course, with his all-pro selections in every year of that decade. And, of course, the NFL celebrating its 100th anniversary all-time team. Anthony placed 12th overall on the all-time 100 selection of the greatest players in the history of the NFL. He was the highest selected and placed offensive lineman overall. And just give you an idea of the magnitude of what he accomplished on the gridiron. And once again, as we do on the Games People Play, we will talk to Anthony today, and we'll certainly give you a perspective of the man in full, on the field and away from the field, to who he is today. And without further ado, we give you Anthony Munoz. Anthony, welcome. Great to have you with us here today.
Ernie, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the chat, and I appreciate that kind introduction. Thank you.
Well, it was impossible not to. Didn't mean to embarrass you, but we just the facts, ma'am, as Joe Friday used to say in Dragnet.
Thank you.
Indeed. And, of course, all stories have a beginning. And, Anthony, just to take us back to the beginning and your story, go back to Ontario, California. You grew up about 40 miles east of Los Angeles, and certainly challenges at home with your home life growing up. One of 5 children, 2 brothers and 2 sisters, 2 older brothers, 2 younger sisters, and your mother Esther certainly played a huge role in your upbringing because of the fact that she was virtually alone during that whole process in bringing up all 5 of the Munoz brood.
You're right. Growing up in Ontario, one of 5 kids, my mom raised all 5 by herself. I never met my dad. My dad was never around. He was in and out of prison when I was growing up. He's passed away, so I'll never meet him. But, the one thing we knew is that we were well supported, well loved. We knew mom was mom, dad, coach, and of course we knew she was the boss because, she kind of laid the law down, and she taught us a lot of valuable lessons, and she didn't have to sit us down and go through and say, okay, this is what work ethic is all about. This is what responsibility is all about. All we had to do was watch her as she worked 2 or 3 jobs to provide for 5 kids. I mean, sometimes she'd leave at 6 in the morning. In season, when the grapes were ripe to pick, she would go out in the fields there in the Inland Empire and pick grapes with relatives, or she would go at 6:37 in the morning and work at a local chicken ranch as she packed eggs. Or, there's many times during the school year when my was home and she would iron clothes for my teachers for pay. And I tell you what, Bernie, there's a lot of great dry cleaners and places that iron clothes and clean. But with all due respect, I don't know if I've ever seen any clothes that were ironed as well as my mom ironed, starched, creased. And so those were some of the jobs she did to provide for us. We never had a car. It was, walked around a lot. We got, at a certain age, we were able to get some bicycles, but we had, she was one of 10. So we had some uncles and relatives that stepped in at times for transportation, coaches. So there was people that helped out, but mom was phenomenal in teaching us work ethic, responsibility. I mean, it was one of those things during the school year. I loved baseball. I loved playing football, sandlot football, or basketball. In order to do that after school, we'd have to finish our homework first, and then we could go out and play. The house was clean, dishes washed, clothes washed. We had to cook for each other, make sure, younger siblings were fed. So that right there is responsibility. If you want to go out and do something you love doing, and for me, it was playing baseball, then you're responsible for taking care of your chores before you do that. So some valuable lessons that we learned that carried through high school, college, my professional career, and even now as an adult.
Mention about baseball from an early age. Football was not an option at an early age because of your size at the time. You were a little bit too big for Pop Warner and youth football. So as a result, you gravitated toward baseball and had great exposure to the game from very early time.
I did. Football was more out in the street, sandlot football. I did start playing baseball when I was 6, 7 years old, and the strength of my game was not my speed, but my arm. I had a tremendous arm and could hit the ball. I wasn't real fast. So the foot of my size, like you said, I played some flag football from like 8 years old to 8th grade. And all I ever played was quarterback because I had these 5 fast wide receivers that I could just throw the ball downfield. But you're right. Baseball was the one sport that my goal was to be a Major League Baseball player. And that was something that I focused on as a kid. But did play all sports. And again, like I said, flag football, I was the quarterback. Had the fast guys running downfield, and I could throw the ball further than anyone. So, that was something to kind of. And then when I got to high school, I wanted to continue the baseball, and I'd never put pads on. My freshman year, all my buddies were playing tackle football, so I said, you know what? At 6'2", 6'3", about 235, I think I needed to play some football as a freshman in high school. So I put the pads on for the first time, watched my friends who had been playing Pop Warner to make sure I put them on right. And then I ran out on the first day I did up into positions, and I ran over to where the quarterbacks were. And he looked up at me, said, what are you doing here? I said, Coach, I'm going to be your quarterback. And he says, no, I don't think so. He says, you got to go in and talk to Henry. Well, Henry was our equipment manager. Henry had to put me a offensive line face mask on my helmet, and I was a little depressed that first day that I went from throwing the football, handing it off, to put my hand on the ground. But it took 1 or 2 days, and it became fun because one of the bigger kids on campus, I was able to pretty much have my way with the defensive players during practice in the game. So baseball was something. I played third base and pitcher for all 4 years in high school. Was all state 3 years in baseball. But it wasn't until I entered my senior year in high school when I was about 6'6", about 290, 295, that I started being recruited for football. I said, well, maybe football is the sport, not baseball.
Coming out of Chaffee High School there in Ontario, and mentioned about third base and pitcher, and a couple of your idols. You had a couple of pretty good ones there to look up to with Brooks Robinson and Juan Marichal at those respective positions.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wanted as a kid. I had my Brooks Robinson glove. I always wanted to make Major League so I could have a baseball glove with my name on it, and hopefully someday have a Louisville Slugger bat with my name. And of course, Juan Marichal, I was an LA kid. 35, 40 minutes from Dodger Stadium. My whole family were Dodger fans. I was a Dodger fan until they played the Giants, and I was the only one in the household on those weekend series when the Dodgers and Giants would play, and Vince Scully would do the game. But as a kid, I did that high leg kick, being head and shoulders taller than most kids in Little League. do that high leg kick, and wanted to be number 27 Juan Marichal, and I tried to scoop everything up at third base. But yeah, you're right. Those two guys are the guys that I looked at and said, man, if I could only be like both of those guys.
In 290 with the big leg kick.
Well, the one year I played at USC, it didn't matter. It was the first time I threw a fastball, and it hit the parking lot behind the left field fence faster than it got into the catcher. So, but I had fun. It was a great sport, and I really enjoyed playing it.
Mention about recruiting, and you did have aspirations, and part of, if you will, part of the clause in your recruiting was to be able to play both sports, and USC was able to afford the opportunity to you. Also, I thought it was of interest just to get an idea of how good an all-around athlete you were. John Robinson scouted you by going to 3 of your basketball games. We're not even talking baseball and football. We're talking about your number 3 sport, and that sold him on your athletic ability and able to bring you into the USC program.
You're right on the first point. The recruiting pitch, go to school, play football, but we'll let you play baseball. And growing up, I was always a USC fan. But I knew that wasn't just a recruiting pitch or a sales pitch. I knew that it was something they had a track record of letting guys do. If you're on a football scholarship and you're good enough to play football, you did it. The only rule was your freshman year, you went through spring football, and then after that, you played baseball. So I knew they had a track record of letting me do that. So, but you're right. John Robinson came to a couple of my basketball games, and that's one of the things they used to do. They would recruit guys that were 6'5", 6'6", might not be as big as they wanted them, but they knew we played basketball, so we had to move our feet. I mean, we had to move our feet in guarding guys because I played basketball at 275, 280. I had to guard guys that were 175, 180, so I had to move my feet extremely quick. Playing third base at 275, I could move in that little area. So and he watched another guy, Keith Van Horn, who played 13 with the Bears. The same thing. He was 6'7", about 245 when he got to USC. But he was a basketball player, and he could move his feet. Of course, he became 2-time All-American at SC and played 13 years in the NFL. So, I remember running out for pregame warm-up in basketball, and their football coaches, I'm thinking, oh, well, that's good enough. At least we have USC people there.
Indeed. You got the right people. You had Trojans in the house.
Exactly.
John Robinson was your football coach. We'll certainly talk about your experience on the gridiron at USC and some of the adversity, considerable adversity you had to overcome. But the baseball coach was perhaps the most famous of all time in college baseball with Rod Dato. And the one year you did get to play, you got to play on a national championship team, College World Series, and you had that experience.
Oh, it was unbelievable. First of all, when I was coming out of high school, it was so long ago that the coaches could come to your house. My day that I had to sign my letter of intent, this Cardinal Cadillac pulls up in front of my house, and it's John Robinson driving. He's got the letter of intent that I'm going to sign. But all of a sudden, I look in the car, and he's got a passenger, a guy sitting shotgun there, and it's Rod Dato. So both of them came to my house.
They both came.
And I'm like, this is unbelievable. So I signed my letter of intent. So John says, I can give you a ride to school, because I was walking. I have a buddy pick me up. And so we get in the car. Rod Dato gets in the back seat. He lets me get shotgun. So we pull out of our driveway, and we start up to my high school Chafee. And all of a sudden, John Robinson grabs the old 8-track tape, and sticks it in. He goes, here's just a little something to get you fired up. And it's the USC marching band. And I'm sitting there going, oh, my God. I can honestly say I don't remember what happened that day at school. It was a great experience. But you're right. It was the one year I played, my freshman, and then my sophomore year, that was my freshman year of baseball, I got to play. We went to the World Series. We were loaded with some amazing talent. I got to pitch like 11 innings that year. I won one game. We spent the Easter vacation in Texas, and I'll never forget our starting pitcher got hit with the line drive. So Rod put me in to pitch, and I pitched enough innings to get the win. So I was 1-0, and I got to go and experience win a national championship. So 1 year now, got a ring. And I tell you, Rod Dato was amazing. The baseball knowledge that he had, we could never daydream on the bench during a game. As a pitcher, I charted a lot of pitches, for the pitchers and stuff. And he would just walk up and down the dugout asking us questions. We had scouting reports on this guy. The count says, what would you throw him? Anthony, or what would you do? And asking all the guys on the bench. So he really kept us on our toes, kept us into the baseball game. Who knows how many All-Americans and how many, pro baseball players he had. I mean, when I was, I remember guys like, Dave Kingman, we talked Bill Lee, we talked, Freddie Lynn, we talked Tom Seaver, Mark McGuire, and, you can go on. And it was just one of those things where baseball, Rod Dedeaux, was basically, he was the John Wooden of the, 40s,
Yeah.
50s, 60s, and
Sport.
70s. John Wooden was winning championships in Westwood, and Rod Dedeaux was winning championships there in South Central LA.
The football experience for you at USC, maybe the best way to describe it was arduous. It was certainly bittersweet because of the injuries that you suffered, and you must have been feeling a little bit, like the old blues song there. If not for bad luck, BB King, I'd have no luck at all.
Yeah.
With not one, not two, but three knee surgeries during your time. The toughest thing for you was to be able to have some luck and stay on the field at USC.
It was those things. My buddies there at USC used to give me a hard time because I went through every preseason camp. I went through every spring practice, and they kept saying, if you're going to get hurt during camp or spring ball. There's no. But it was
Right.
one of those things where my freshman year, 7 games into the season, I go down. So I missed the UCLA, Notre Dame, Rose Bowl. Sophomore year, I was totally healthy, so I played the entire season. My third year, same week, 7 weeks, right before the UCLA game, I missed UCLA, Notre Dame, and Rose Bowl. Although I did start for 7 games. We won the national championship that year, so I blocked 7 games for a Heisman Trophy winner, Charles White. And then my senior year, we won the national championship. My junior year, we go into my senior year ranked number 1. We're loaded. We are totally loaded. The first quarter, I go down Lubbock, Texas. I know what has to happen. This time, I'd had 2 on my right. This time, a DB stuck his helmet in my left. I knew flying back to LA what was going to happen. I'd experienced that pain. I missed the entire season, not just the UCLA, Notre Dame, but the entire season. But I was determined. I was determined to rehabilitate. I knew we would get back to our 3rd Rose Bowl. I'd yet to play in one. And the guys thought I was nuts. My routine was I'd go to class, go to rehab, lift weights, go back to my apartment, do homework, and just get ready. And I convinced John Robinson to let me start practicing because my leg was ready. And the doctor gave me the okay, so I made every practice leading up to the Rose Bowl, earned my starting job back, and played the entire game. And the crazy thing about it, Bernie, as I look back, looked to the videotape, might have been the best game I played in 4 years. The entire season. Of course, the rest is history.
What has been referred to, or what I saw referred to, and went back and took a look as the block, springing the guy aforementioned Charles White for the winning touchdown in that 17-16 victory over the Buckeyes in that great USC Ohio State Rose Bowl rivalry that has been recounted so many times in the history of college football. You were more than a minor player in terms of rehabbing to be able to come back and get on the field.
I think I had to take a couple plays off. I had to run out. Bruce Matthews, who was a freshman, he ends up being a two-time All-American, a Pro Football Hall of Famer, played 20 years. He was a freshman, so he had to, and he started the UCLA game. He had to run in because I think I was hyperventilating a little bit, and I had to come out, catch my breath, and then I ran back in. But you're right, we ran the ball for I think like 250 yards. Charles White. The crazy thing, Charles and I were seniors, and so he was the lead blocker, and it was just frustrating because we ran it all over during the whole game. But we had to, like you said, we had to drive the final drive to win. But we got the win, and it was just, my teammates, the guys I had, and that was the main motivation, Bernie, is that I had yet to play in the Rose Bowl with the guys I went into school with. And, like Charles White and Brad Buddy, who was a number 1 pick for the Chiefs, and Van Horn, Roy Foster, who came in as a guard or a fullback All-American guard, and Ronnie Lott and Dennis Smith, and, guys like that that I'd gone in with and played with. I wanted to play in at least one Rose Bowl with them. So I did that. I got to accomplish that. And what a way to end a short-lived but great senior year there at USC.
You mentioned one of the guys you just mentioned, Brad Buddy, great NFL lineage.
Yeah.
His dad, Ed, with the Kansas City Chiefs. I also noted the fact, of all teams, you kind of like the Kansas City Chiefs. So you kind of liked them as your team growing up. I thought that was interesting.
Well, it's crazy. I talked about Brooks Robinson on our show, and I told you at the age of 8, I started playing flag football. So at about 10 years old, I was a quarterback. So it was guys like Bill Nelson in Cleveland, Roman Gabriel at the Rams, and then I just fell in love with number 16 of the Chiefs, Lenny Dawson.
Yeah.
So at the age of 10, it was right about that time where they, were getting ready, or they beat the Vikings in the Super Bowl. So I knew their whole starting lineup. Jim Tyre, Dave Hill, Buddy Rutney. They had Jimmy Lynch. They had, Buck Buchanan, and I could just name them all. So the crazy thing about it, so I'm 10 years old, and I fall in love with the Chiefs. now fast forward about 7 years, and I'm getting ready to enroll at USC. And so I'm going to my first camp, and my line coach says, I'm going to room you with another offensive lineman. He's from Kansas City, Missouri, and his name's Brad Buddy. And I looked at my coach, and I said, and sure enough, Brad and I roomed together my freshman year. Of course, we got really close. We're like brothers. We're still great friends. I had a chance to go back to his wedding in Kansas City. And my wife and I got married my sophomore year. And this was our junior year when Brad got married. And I'm sitting in this church, and it was a humongous wedding, Bernie. I mean, it was tons of people. And my best buddy's getting married. And I'm looking around the church, and I'm like, Dee, there's Lenny Dawson. Dee, there's Jan Stinner. And she goes, Anthony, there's a wedding taking place. I said, but I know, look at all these Kansas City Chiefs. So that was, and of course, now being a Hall of Famer with all those guys, it's like Willie Lanier and Jan Stinner and Bobby Bell. And I mean, it's just, it'd be nice here in the next year or two to get Ed Buddy in the Hall because he's very deserving. But yeah, Brad, amazing player, man. He came in as a freshman, and he looked like he'd already been through college. I mean, physically, just bulked, and of course, he was the 11th pick of the draft for the Chiefs. So I learned what intensity was all about because he'd been around the game. His dad played at Michigan State. I think his mom, if I'm not mistaken, his mom and dad had him just after their senior year in high school. So he spent all 4 or 5 years at Michigan State with his dad, and then just about his whole dad's career there in Kansas City. And the crazy thing about it is this is how close they miss playing with each other. Our freshman year at USC, the Chiefs flew Brad Buddy out for his dad's retirement. And it was like, wait, he's retiring and you're a freshman in college. But yeah, Brad, I mean, I had some amazing teammates at USC.
And you mentioned about the fact that you were married, met your wife and was actually married, your last 2 years at USC. What about that experience?
Well, we started dating right after my freshman year of college. And I came back and we got married. It was the spring of my sophomore year. It was during school, during spring football, and during baseball because I was doing both at the same time. We got married, and it was amazing. I was ready. She was ready. And those last 2 years, 2.5 years of, especially with what I went through, is having her support, her encouragement. I mean, it meant all the world. And there's probably about 5 or 6 of us there at school that were married. And I think they were all offensive linemen too, Tell people, some people just get mature quicker than others. My wife's still waiting for that maturity to kick in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I refer to it, we're about the same age, arrested adolescence. It's something you can't shake.
That's right. That's right. So, it was the best decision. I'm very thankful. She's an amazing lady.
Indeed. Also, fortuitous for you, Anthony, in how you pursued your rehab, your relentless pursuit of rehab to get back and play in a Rose Bowl. And we've talked about what you did on the field. Spectators of interest at that Rose Bowl, the first family of the NFL, the Brown family, were in attendance. And I love the comment from Paul's son, Mike, was a long time a part of the Cincinnati organization. He was so big and he was so good, it was a joke, was the quote from – well, the joke wasn't on the Bengals because they were able to step up when the draft came, but it couldn't have worked out better to have Paul and family in the stands to have a chance to, what was a rarity, to see you play during your senior year.
Well, I'll tell you, I think, first of all, when the starting lineup was announced, a lot of people were saying, who's that number? Who that is? But you're right. I was fortunate that they watched the football game. Of course, Paul Brown and everything he's done for the game of football. I had a chance to be around him for 10 of my 13 years here in Cincinnati before he passed. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm glad that things worked out for me to rehab and to be at the top of my game because it really paid off. When it was all said and done, I think more than half the teams had failed me in my physical. But it only took one team, and I mean, not really knowing what was going to happen because before that senior year, a lot of the experts had projected me as a top pick. After that third knee operation, they said might be lucky as a free agent. People probably won't even take a shot. So I just wanted to get physically ready to show them that I was still capable of doing some stuff. And, I was always the last one out of physical examinations with the medical doctors. All the, we had like 6 different combines around the country at that time. We didn't have the one central. I was always sitting there with every doctor, checking, rechecking, and I'm thankful that they did that. The Bengals flew me to Cincinnati in January after all the physicals. They were the only team to send their head coach out to L.A. They just named Forrest Gregg their head coach. as we know, two-time Pro Bowler at guard and tackle, Hall of Fame tackle for the Green Bay Packers. Vince Lombardi in his last book said he was the finest player he ever coached. And he came out and put me through about a 2-hour workout at USC. So he saw that. And I'm thankful that they watched the game, that Forrest Gray came out and worked me out, that they had confidence that I could, really make it through and play a while. And so I'm thankful that, again, we talked about, bittersweet 4 years at USC. I look back and I'm thankful that I went through that time, even though it was very tough, because I really learned what it means to go through true adversity. I mean, not being able to do something because you're physically incapacitated, you can't do it. That was some real adversity, because the 4 years in high school, playing football, basketball, and baseball, I'd go from sport to sport to sport for 4 years, and I can't remember missing a game because of an injury. Now I'm sitting there every year I'm hurt at USC, and it just taught me a lot about myself and what it means to really, really be ready and play. So when I got to Cincinnati, I started making some individual goals. Of course, you always have your team goals first, but I wanted to play 10-plus years. I wanted to be a starter every year. I wanted to be a Pro Bowler, and that's how I worked during the season and the off season for that.
You mentioned about Forrest Gregg, the Hall of Fame tackle, coming out as the new head coach to work you out. And I think you said it's been about 2 hours working you out. But there was one play in particular that I'd like to get your version of in terms of Forrest. I don't know if he tried a little swim move on you, or a little inside, outside, a little bit of a fake, but it didn't end well for Forrest, and that might have cemented you as their number one draft pick.
I was a little scared after that, but the story you're talking about. Now, first of all, at USC, Hudson Houck was my line coach. He spent over 30 years in the NFL, a great line coach. We were kind of on the cutting edge at USC. We had already started to use our hands and punch before it really became, the thing to do. So when I got to Cincinnati, I had a kind of a head start. So Forrest Gray comes out, and like I said, about an hour and a half, 2-hour workout, and he is just putting me through and the last thing he says, he goes, "Now, Anthony, I'm going to be a pass rusher, and you just react." So he lined up outside of me, and he gave me a little outside fake, and then he came inside, but he tried to kind of grab my shoulder. So I was taught, when they do this, your chest is exposed. So he did that, and I had my hands right here, and I'm trained, when he exposed that chest, it's just boom, and you just punch him. I punched him, and Bernie, the first thing that hit the ground was the back of his head. It just went whack, and I looked over and I extended my hand. I said, "Forrest, I am so sorry." He looked up on his back and he just laughed. He goes, "That's all right, son." I knew right then, I think that was a good thing. So I went from my heart dropping to the ground to feeling pretty good. And so that's a true story, that I hit him with both hands right in the chest. And he was still pretty intimidated. I mean, he was probably, 40 years old, about 6'5", about 245, 250. But he hit the ground pretty hard. I don't think he expected me to punch him, but that's just something, and he was okay with it, and it worked out.
matter of technique. So you passed the audition, as it were, with Forrest Gregg, and he wasn't angry. Instead, he was probably happy, because he found his left tackle for the next decade for the Cincinnati Bengals, as it turned out. And I got to ask you, coming off of the experience you had at USC with obviously the surgeries and the rehab after the surgeries, what did you learn from the injuries that translated into your conditioning as a pro? I mean, you went from missing almost 3 years at USC to missing 3 games in over a decade as a Bengal. I mean, that is remarkable as far as the turnaround. And
Right.
I'm sure part of it was educational process for you there that you were able to put forth.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting, Bernie, because I look at each one of the injuries I had at USC, and I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Guys falling on my legs and stuff. But one thing I learned my last couple of years at SC was just being in the best shape possible. Going into my senior year, after that second knee operation, I was probably in the best shape I'd ever been in my life. There was 3 of us. Back then, you worked summer jobs. So Brad Buddy, who we talked about, another couple offensive, we lived on campus. We'd get back about 5:30. We would grab a bite, and we'd go right to the weight room, right to running, and we just were busting it. And that's when I learned about preparation. So when I got to Cincinnati, it was one of those things that I couldn't put it in cruise control and be satisfied. I had to even add to that. And they would give us a conditioning program, and I'd always add to the running or weightlifting. I'd always maybe add a day or two. And it was something that in my mind, I wanted to be in better shape than the guy I was playing against. If we had to drive 80 yards in the fourth quarter, maybe a southern city that was hot, I was going to be in better shape than that defensive lineman. Was I? I don't know, but I felt I was. So that I ran year round. It was something that after missing 3 or 4 years at USC, I wanted to make sure that my conditioning was not a problem, my strength level was not a problem. So when I got to camp, I didn't have to worry about getting into shape. So all I had to worry about when I got to camp was give me the playbook and let's start, executing the plays and technique. And that's kind of the approach I took. And I knew that had to be that way. It was now my profession. I didn't have to go to class now. Then at USC, I was going to class. I was studying. Now it was my profession. I'd go to the meeting. I'd study my playbook. And then I had plenty of time to physically get ready. So that's kind of the approach I took. And, of course, you go in as a rookie at 21 years old. You're a young guy, so you're having to really establish and prove yourself. Now, as I got closer to 30, you're considered an old guy. You got young guys that are nipping at your heels. So I increased and I really turned up the volume even more as I got older in my running and my lifting. And going into my 13th year, cardiovascular, I was probably in the best shape out of all 13 years going into camp. It was just one of those things. But that's what I learned. I learned that you really had the physical part of your game, the mental part of your game, but physically. And I just carried over. And one of my goals is I wanted to play 10 plus years, double-digit years. And in order to do that, I had to be in the best shape and as strong as I could be. And that's the approach I took.
Do you remember your first preseason game? And reportedly, you blocked somebody off the field. You weren't wearing a security jacket, but you literally erased them or evicted them from the field. That made an impression as far as the Bengals saying, what do we have here? I think maybe we got a guy that might be a fixture at that position for a while.
Well, I remember like it was yesterday, we went out to Mile High Stadium. It was the Denver Broncos. And, now I wasn't, battling guys on my own team at camp, which, after a while it gets kind of old, especially, when I got to camp, it was, 2 days you had the pads on and with your teammates. I mean, we had to work together to go win games. So we went out to the Broncos and now it was time. I mean, I knew that we wouldn't play the entire game, but we weren't sure how much we played because they didn't tell you you're going to play one series and then you're out. Most of the times we played a half, and being a rookie, you probably play a half. So I just that's another thing I learned, Bernie, is that you don't just play a little bit of the down. I learned you go from the snap and then you keep going until you hear the whistle. And sometimes those defensive linemen are not going to like that because they think they hear the whistle before the whistle actually blows. So that was, our whole philosophy with the coach I had in Cincinnati was finish. We used to write finish on our shirts, and you go from snap to whistle. And that was the whole, attitude we had. And so it was, you have those guys maybe kind of let up a little bit, but I didn't hear a whistle. And all of a sudden we come back the next day and we're watching the time. But that's a good goal to have because the coaches really like that.
Indeed. Some of the adjectives to describe you as a player, athletic to the point of maybe nimble, your agility, size, quickness, strength, you had all those elements. But you also had a guy who's arguably, well, we talk about you, and people do talk about you, as we said at the Open, as the greatest man at the tackle position, greatest man on the offensive line of all time. You also had arguably the greatest offensive line coach at all time. And he was with you the entire decade with Jim McNally. Now, I'm a Giants fan, truth be told.
Okay, yeah.
And a very good friend of mine who passed away in March is a fellow you might know, Jack Cleary, was a longtime writer.
Yeah.
And he actually penned the bio of Paul Brown. And Jack was a longtime mentor to me, Anthony.
Oh, wow.
And Jack was a Fordham guy. And Jack was also a Giants fan, truth be told, even though he was so close with Paul Brown. And he maintained up until just a couple of years before he passed away his Giants season tickets. And I can remember him telling me about Jim McNally. And when the Giants got Jim McNally later in his career about, hey, Bern, keep an eye on the Giants offensive line this year. They got Jim McNally. You had the benefit of Jim McNally for really your entire career. It was, no wonder you became the best. You had Forrest Gregg as your coach and Jim McNally.
It's amazing because one of the questions I just asked, being on the board of the Hall of Fame and being a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I didn't realize, I thought it was just head coaches that could go in the Hall of Fame. There are many assistant coaches that should be in the Hall of Fame because I played 13 years in the NFL. My first 4 years, like we talked, Forrest Gregg was my head coach. Jim McNally, who they hired right before they drafted me. So you're right. I played all 13 years with Jim McNally. The
Amazing.
guy was amazing. We worked together. We watched other tackles. We, tried to incorporate things to make our technique better. And he was just constantly, always very technical. It didn't matter if you blocked your guy. It's how you blocked them. It was all about the right steps and the leverage and the hands, and which I love. That's how I was trained. So you're right. And a funny story about Jim McNally going to the Giants. So he went from Cincinnati to Carolina, and then Capers left. So he was sitting there without a team, and he calls me and he says, Anthony, can you do me a favor? And I said, Jim, what do you want? He says, can you call Jim Fossil and give him a recommendation for me? I laughed. I said, Jim, I said, if you need a recommendation, I said, but I will call Jim Fossil and I will give him a recommendation because you're one of the best, if not the best. And so that was the whole Giant thing. And you mentioned the Giants. I do some radio with David Deal quite a bit, once or twice a year.
Yeah.
Of course, Jimmy coached him. And one of the things we always talk about, he says, Anthony, I love the one-arm pistola. And that's we'd have this arm back, and it was the one hand, basically translating the one-hand gun, pistola. And Jimmy taught him, and David said, man, that was great. I loved it. He used to show video on your one-arm pistola. And so David loves him. And every time I do a radio show, we always end up talking about Jim McNally. But I have to share one Jim McNally story. We could talk 5 hours. So my first 2 years, I lived in California in the off season. So I go back after my rookie year, and I'm literally laying in bed. Every midnight, 1 o'clock Cincinnati time, because of the 3-hour difference, my phone rings, and it's Jim McNally. He says, Anthony, I've been in the office. So he was in the office at 12 midnight, 1 o'clock. He says, I want you to get in your stance. So I have the telephone. All of a sudden, I get in my stance, and my wife says, what are you doing? I get in my stance, and he starts talking about shifting the weight and doing this. I knew the next day I'd lift weights, I would run, and then I would work on this out on the field, as I did all the time. So I did that, and I said, yeah, I can feel it. And he goes, I said, yeah. So I hang up the phone. About 3 weeks later, he calls again. It's about 10 o'clock at night for me, and he's got to be in the office. And he says, Anthony, I got something else. Get in your stance. So this time I lay in my bed, and I'm laying on my bed. And I knew, again, like I said, I knew the next day I was going to go out. I knew what he was talking about. I would work on it. So I'm laying in my bed this time, not in a stance. So I went out the next day and did what he was doing. But it just took me one time to get in the stance at 10:30 at night. The next night I'm in my bed agreeing with what he's saying. Yeah, I feel it. But that's Jim, man. He was always working. And it was unbelievable because we came into the league together, and he ended up coaching forever. Phenomenal. I still, he still does a lot of clinics, still has a lot to offer. But you're right. He is one of the best.
People that watch football on maybe more casual and maybe even a little bit more intense level, they don't realize it is technique. It's knowing the playbook. You mentioned audibles and line calls and awareness that goes into it, the defensive alignment, making adjustments, and also at the position of left tackle, you're similar to a pitcher who might give up a gopher ball, which you could relate to. Being a pitcher and giving up a hit, you got to be resilient. You got to have that short memory working for you.
You're right, that short memory. And it's funny that you mentioned a pitcher and left tackle, because one of the things we had kind of a repertoire of different, like I had 6 or 7 different pass sets. So I could go into a game and I'd study you, Bernie. I'd say, okay, this is what my initial stuff's going to be. But like a pitcher, if I throw you fastball after I don't care if I'm throwing 95, you're going to sit on the fastball. Eventually you're going to hit it. So if I pass set to you the same every single time, you're going to have a chance to counter it. So with the confidence, with the stuff we had, I would set short, I would set deep, I would jump the guy, which means an aggressive. So I would change up, and I saw myself as a pitcher. I would throw a fastball, curveball, come back with the fastball, maybe a change. So I did that during the game, and that's what we got. Okay, work on it, have the confidence, and go with it. But then we had other things that we could go to and kind of change up. So that was the great thing about being an offensive lineman. We were on the ball, we were off the ball, close to my guard, separate from the guard, and you use that. And a lot of times defensive linemen, so I know exactly what you're going to do. Because no, we might be blocking together and get together, and then the next time we'll be close, but I'm blocking out and he's going that way. So what you do, we called it dummy calls or dummy, and they wouldn't know what you're going to do. And so that was the fun thing about being an offensive lineman, man. We could mess with, we would call it take all the line of scrimmage. When he would say on the ball, he would say, Anthony, take so much of the ball that the official has to say 78, back up a little bit. Because I would be so close. And one of the things I would do, and right before the snap, I'd creep up and stay in an up stance, and I would be right on the line. So as soon as he came out of his stance, my hands would be right there on him. So that was the fun stuff about, playing line, is you could just, like I said, like a pitcher, man, change up, throw different pitches, different sets, and have the whole strategy of offensive line. But then that's your personal game plan. Then you have your offensive game plan, where you had to work with the other guys.
And you mentioned about the stance. Of final point there with Jim McNally, he actually gave you your stance, which was a rather unique stance in and of itself, your regular set, if you will, and that was part of Jim kind of working in the lab with you as to what your attributes were.
Well, that's the thing. So many coaches have their system,
right?
And they want everybody to fit in that system, like putting a round peg into a square. Well, I might not be a list, kind of like you said, mad scientist in the lab. We're working on this. So here, you do this, do that. So my stance might look totally different than the right tackle or another left tackle that's playing. So it's all about comfort and how you, and that was the great thing about Jimmy, is that we were always working together. He was always working to see how he could put his guys in the best position to be successful.
A couple of things about the era that you played in, unique to the era, which I look back as really a golden era, if you will, just a great era of the NFL. Not just because the Giants were an annual contender and they won a couple of Super Bowls, but that was part of it for me.
I thought maybe it was the hair that you were referring to, the hair.
That had a unique quality to it, too.
Yeah.
That's no question. But the fact that the passing game became more prominent, and once you got to Sam Weich and the hurry-up, your stamina, your conditioning, running more plays, passing game was more evident, and also the quickness, the athletic ability of guys playing your position became much more significant because of the advent of the pass rusher. In particular, I got to get back to the Giants for a minute, but once that guy 56 came along for the Giants and a few people started to follow him, there was a whole new set of problems for left tackles in the NFL. It wasn't just the defensive end now. It was guys that were coming off the edge from the outside linebacker. And you were right in the thick of that with the guys you were facing week in and week out.
Well, Lawrence Taylor, there was a stunt that him and Leonard Marshall ran, and we called it the Giant stunt. I mean, and it didn't matter if we were playing the Broncos, the Raiders, or the Giants. If they ran that stunt, it was the Giant stunt. You talk about LT, you talk about Derek Thomas.
Yeah.
With Pat Swilling, Clay Matthews up in Cleveland, who I played with in college. So you had all these hybrid guys. I would study my defensive end for 2 downs, and I knew that those guys were going to come in. But you're right. The offense that we ran with Sam was unbelievable. Of course, I've yet to, and I'm pretty biased, but I've yet to see anybody run play action pass as well as Boomer did. I mean, because he had that same motion, handing the ball off or not handing the ball off. So nobody knew what he was doing. But, once we got that running game going with James Brooks and Nicky Wood, of course, the play action pass was amazing. But you're right. Sam Weich's, attack offense, hurry up. We had 3 or 4 different huddles, and it might at times be a hurry up. And at times we might just get to the line of scrimmage and milk the clock down to the last several seconds and have those defensive linemen locked in a 3-point stance for the whole time, which is very difficult. A lot of people thought when we would, snap the ball when defenses were trying to substitute, that it was just trying to get 5 yards. No, we had design plays that we had implemented during the season or during the week that we literally had a play to run if they were trying to. And, so that was the fun thing about it. But the thing about it, man, you had to study. You had to be on top of it mentally, which was great, a great challenge. And we had a guy like Boomer who held us accountable because he was one of the smart. I played for 2 smart quarterbacks, Kenny Anderson, Boomer. But Boomer, man, he held you accountable because we had to study and be on the same page come Sunday.
Want to talk about the Super Bowl appearances in a moment, but while we're on the subject, you had the hybrid guys, and then obviously you had the defensive ends that you had to contend with. You had guys like, you had Bruce Smith and Selman, and a guy that you ran into. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl once again, but Fred Dean was a guy that you ran into. You almost couldn't avoid him. The year that he got traded and he ended up, and then you saw him again in the Super Bowl. It's like, it was like a bad dream coming back to you to have to see Fred Dean again.
Well, Bernie, it's crazy because he was in San Diego before he went to so my rookie year, we played the Chargers and he was with San Diego. So I watched tape on him from the previous year when the Bengals played him. And I said, this guy can't be that quick. I said, is this kind of a high-speed video that there's – I played him my rookie year. And yeah, he was that quick. He was that strong. And then he went to the 49ers. Of course, my second year, we played the 49ers in regular season, and there's Fred Dean. So then – but he was more of a nickel guy, a pass rush specialist. So we get to Super Bowl 16, and we say, okay, we got to stay out of the nickel. We got to keep them in their base defense. Well, what do? First play of the game, they come out with their nickel defense, and there's number 74, 240. He had the speed of a running back and had the strength of a 290-pound lineman. The guy was just phenomenal. Of course, now when the haul together, I've gotten to know him, and what a great guy. I mean, he's just phenomenal. But he was one of the best that I played against.
Who was, if you had to pick one, was there a toughest opponent? Is there someone that would take the mantle of toughest opponent for one Anthony Munoz?
You've mentioned some, and I can probably give you a dozen guys. I mean, you mentioned Fred Dean, you mentioned Leroy Selman. One guy that I don't believe gets enough credit, and he was all pro at 3 positions, that's Joe Klecko there with the Jets.
Yeah.
He was the strongest guy that I ever faced. But the guy that I still believe was the best all around was Bruce Smith. Size, speed, strength, smart. He was amazing. Played 19 years, of course, as we know in the Hall. But like I said, I could go on, and I mean, there was Howie Long, great Sean Jones. I mean, Leonard Marshall was excellent. Richard Dent. I mean, I can just go on and on naming them, but I still, every time it comes back to number 78, Bruce Smith.
First Super Bowl appearance was after the '81 season, your second year, and a dramatic turnaround in the fortunes of the Bengals. This was all uncharted territory for the Bengals. You're 6-10 your rookie year. You're 12-4. You're the number 1 seed. The Jungle was born that year with perfect 8-0, and then winning the 2 playoff games, so 10-0 through to the Super Bowl. Your memories about how it turned around that year must have been really special for you as a young player to see that things could turn so dramatically and so quickly to success.
Well, Bernie, when I got there my rookie year, of course, I got a whole new coaching staff. Forrest Gregg is not the coach. We talked about Jim McNally. And I looked at the talent we had. They were 12 years before I got there. They had all these number 1 picks: Ross Browner, Wilson Whitley, Eddie Edwards, Gary Burley. They had Glenn Cameron. They had Bo Harris. On defense, Kenny Riley was still there. Offensively, Kenny Anderson. We had Pete Johnson, Danny Ross, Isaac Curtis. And I'm thinking, how does this team go 4-12 2 years in a row? Well, I found out quickly. Forrest Gregg weeded out some of the guys that might not have wanted to be there, and he got everybody into shape. I think the main thing was the work ethic was not there. And like you said, we go from, my rookie year, 6-10. We could have very easily been 10-6. We lost some games late. Then that second year, we go 12-4, number 1 seed, home field advantage. And it just all came together, man. We had the big running back in Pete Johnson, a tight end that was, had trouble staying at 220, Danny Ross. But around him, he had a amazing rookie year. Max Montoya was now playing unbelievable at guard. We had Dave Lapham. But it was one of those things where everybody got into shape. And I think just the confidence came together. Forrest came in as a disciplinarian and said, this is how we're going to do it. We had Dick LeBeau and Hank Bulla on the defense. I mean, seeing things that we'd never seen in football. We'd line up with 1 defensive lineman and 5 linebackers. The nose tackle would get down. So offenses had to figure out who are the linemen, who's going to rush. So the zone blitz was now in play. And this was my second year, with Dick LeBeau and Hank Bulla. And it was just Lindy Afonte was there as an offensive coordinator, basically running the West Coast offense. It was a fun year because, like I said, I could see the potential from that rookie year, 6-10, of the guys we had there. And it was just amazing to see the transformation. and the work ethic really improved to get it done. We're going to be in shape. We're going to be strong. We're going to bust it during practice, and that's what we did.
A couple of guys that had some Boston roots to college. Danny Ross went to Northeastern.
Exactly.
Pat McAnally at Harvard. I've been broadcasting Harvard football for the past 23 years. As I tell everybody, Anthony, even though my SAT scores didn't get any better, I went to Boston University. So I got always issue.
That's a great school. Yeah.
I got to always issue that disclaimer. And you mentioned another guy. I'll have to give you. Here's a story. You're giving me the stories. That's your job. But I got to give you one story. You mentioned Dave Lapham. And Dave Lapham, he was from Wakefield, Mass.
Right.
I don't know. Yep. Syracuse.
Yep.
And you talk about knew him when. Well, I still live in the same house. I was going to say we haven't moved to a new stadium. I haven't put any luxury boxes in. But the house that I live in now, I moved in 1973, and I can still remember as a 12-year-old following Dave Lapham around because he was part of the moving crew that moved me from my old house to my new house. So there's one for you on Dave Lapham you made on the offensive line.
Wow. So I played next to Dave. My first 4 years
right.
next to Dave Lapham.
Yep.
For 30-plus years, he's been an amazing analyst on the Bengals radio network and does a phenomenal job. But yeah, he was and smart. I mean, great guy, smart. Here's a Lapham story. Lapp was about 265, 270, and he had some of the biggest arms I'd ever seen. Still does. And so we would walk out on the field. Of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers were the guys with the no sleeves, short sleeves, and had the big guns. And Lapp would look at Webster and look at those guys and say, "Man, look at those guns." I'd say, "Lapp, have you ever looked in the mirror at your arms?" But the guys, I love Dave Lapham. In fact, 1998, the year I was inducted to the Hall of Fame, and they had a full-day radio. They dedicated a park. We had a big dinner at the convention center. And they said, "You got to bring one guy back that you played with." And I said, "That's a no-brainer. I got to check, see if Dave Lapham could come back." So he flew back to Ontario with me, and we did radio together. And, so he was part of the festivities. And, yeah, I love Dave, and he's amazing. He MCs. We just had a virtual dinner for my foundation, but 18 years, Dave has been the MC or co-MC of my foundation dinner. And, it wouldn't be a foundation dinner without Dave Lapham as the MC.
Oh, that's great. That mentioned Kenny Anderson was MVP, was the top-rated passer. You mentioned Pete Johnson and Chris Collinsworth, one of your top wideouts. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention on the road to the Super Bowl, you handled Buffalo 28-21. And then you had San Diego, and probably fortuitous, you being a Californian, you brought a Cali team in to play under some rather severe weather conditions. Your memories of that game with the wind chill, what did it check in, about minus 59 with the wind chill?
Bernie, just a little cool, January, December day. I mean, we're used to those kind of days. The funny thing about it is, man, I tell you what, I roomed with Max Montoya for 10 years on the road, camp, and we used to stay in the hotel the night before. And I'd be the guy that would open up the hotel curtains and kind of give a weather report. So that morning I opened it up. I said, "Max, blue skies, the sun's out. It's a great day." And we couldn't start our cars. I mean, they had a hotel van ready, took us down to Riverfront Stadium. I mean, it was crazy, painfully cold. Then we played on that great stuff they called AstroTurf, which is like a thin carpet on asphalt, just unbelievable. I mean, of course, San Diego just come off that little warm game down at Miami with the Dolphins. But one thing, it's amazing. I got to mention this. So they said, "What if you guys would have played in regular weather? Could you guys have beat the Chargers with who they had?" I said, "How quickly we forget." I think it was in November that season. We went out to San Diego. And I think we scored like 34, beat them like 34-14, something like that, out in San Diego that same year. And it was 70, 75 degrees. They had Air Coryell still with, Kellen Winslow and Jefferson and those guys, Chuck Muncie. So, but no, Bernie, that 59 below, you're right. The sun was out, but it was so cold. We didn't have all the nice undergarments they have now. They can wear all this. It was like gray T-shirt, shoulder pads, and of course, it's not the end thing for offensive linemen. So we're out there sleeveless, 59 below. And, I figured, heck, we're crazy enough to play the game in that weather. Why not go out sleeveless?
Absolutely, badge of honor. And the 49ers, well, very similar to the Bengal club that year. They had been 6-10 the year before. They were 13-3. They were the number one seed with Bill Walsh and Joe Montana at the controls of the offense. Had won in Cincinnati in December that year, and two teams that nobody really could make much of in terms of their track record. San Francisco was favored by 2 points. You look back on that game, statistically, absolutely dominant. When you think of the job that your offense did, was the first Super Bowl where the team that outgained the other team, we're talking a significant margin, the total offense, 356 to 275, you're plus 81 in the game, had lost with your Bengal team. But once again, what do coaches say about turnovers, Anthony? That proved to really take its toll in terms of the final result.
And it was the two right before half. We're down 14-zip, and we think we're going to go down, halftime 14-zip. And Ray Wershing kicks these squib kicks. We fumble, they get it, kick a field goal, they do another one. So they get 6 points just like that right before half. So instead of 14-zip, we're down 20. And those 6 points were the difference because we came out the second half, and I think at one point we were 8-0 in first downs. And we were just really dominating. We were rolling. And, of course, another big series that second half after we got rolling was that, 4 downs at the 1 yard line. We couldn't punch it in. And
goal line stand.
Exactly. And if I'm not a betting man, but if someone would have told me going into that game with the 260-pound fullback, running back, that you're going to have 4 cracks at the 1 yard line and you're not going to score, I would have put my deed down for my house and said, you're crazy.
And falling short there at 26-21 there in your first opportunity to play in the Super Bowl. That was with Forrest Gregg. You would get an opportunity later in your career, and there they were again, the 49ers. And by this time, the opinion and the perspective on the 49ers had changed dramatically. They had been a dominant team in the 80s with Joe Montana. And once again, a Super Bowl that's looked back, and I'm sure you're sick of watching the tape anyway as far as the final result, but one of the Super Bowls that's looked at as one of the very best and one of the most dramatic. Your thoughts, other than the ultimate disappointment, as you look back on what was your second trip there in 1988?
First of all, Bernie, seriously, I thought with the talent we had after 16 that we were going to go, 2 or 3 more times there, but it wasn't. The guy that had one catch and it happened to be the final touchdown catch, and that's John Taylor. I mean, Jerry Rice had an amazing game, but our defense did enough to stop them from getting in the end zone. And we have that long kickoff return for a touchdown by Stanford Jennings, and Jim Breach is on the verge of really being the Super Bowl MVP with 3 field goals, and we back them up. They have 92 yards to go in 3 minutes or less, and we're thinking our defense is going to do it again, and it was so frustrating. And we had our chances. I mean, they had I think a 3rd and 16, and we stop them then, and there's not a lot of time left. But Jerry Rice makes the catch. He breaks the tackle, and I think he gets 17 or 18 yards. So he makes the first down by a yard or 2, and that's really what kept them going. But very frustrating because, even though I don't think we played as well as we should have, I thought, we had done enough late in the game, and it just didn't work out. And, of course, like I said, that Montana to John Taylor, that last play with 34 seconds left, every Super Bowl season, I see that highlight, and he always catches it. He never misses it. So,
some adversity affected the team. Your recollection of what happened the night before was really unfortunate. Stanley Wilson, your fullback, key contributor to your club, and what happened with the incident with him, and also the backdrop in as far as the atmosphere in Miami. You had the Overton, you had the rioting that was going on that week. There was a lot away from the field. Any effect as you think back? Any residual effect in terms of your club getting focused and being able to have the eyes on the prize for the game on that day?
Well, I think the last thing you mentioned, I think with the riots going on, we were able to pretty much focus even with all that going on. And then we moved out of downtown on Saturday, out by the stadium on a smaller hotel, quieter place. So I think we overcame that whole riot thing, but the night before and actually early in the game were 2 things I think really had an effect. Sam let us. Usually we had dinner and then met right after the meeting. Sam says right at dinner, he says, "There's a Super Bowl special. Why don't you guys go back to the room, watch it, and as soon as it's over, we'll meet." And of course we did that. We all got back in the meeting room, and when something's going on. You could just feel it within the team. And of course, the whole team was in the meeting room, but no coaches. And then Sam comes in and he informs us the whole ordeal with Stanley Wilson and his ring and crack cocaine. So again, sure, you hate to see that. He's, an integral part of our offense, the team. But more than that, it's a human bomb that was dropped emotionally. So now we had to overcome that. Move on, biggest game of your career with one of your teammates, one of your family members. You thought he had been over the drug problem, but it still bit him, still got him. So we go into the game. We're like, okay, now we got to move in. Sunday, we wrap up our reviews that morning. We go into the game, and then the second thing is, one of our team leaders, the defensive leader, early in the game, Tim Crumride, ugly, breaks his leg. Now, we lose him. David Grant, rookie from West Virginia, does a very good job, but it's hard to replace the Tim Crumride on the defense. So, we had to overcome both those things, and they're not excuses, but man, mentally very taxing. It takes a toll, and I thought we did a good job, even with those things going on, to focus and come out and play pretty well. But he's the nightmare. Joe Montana keeps doing it.
I was going to say, still haunting you. And, it figures him being a Notre Dame guy and you being a Trojan. So.
Well, I was very successful against Notre Dame. We were 3-1. But in my football career, I was 0 for Joe Montana. In fact, the one game we lost to Notre Dame, who was the quarterback? Joe Montana. And I think I was 0-4 against the 49ers, and all 4 were against Joe Montana.
All against Joe. The measurables at the tackle position, you look and just gaudy for that year. You were first in the NFL, 448 points with that offense. Ran for over 2,700 yards, 27-10. 63.02 for total yards. And once again, Kenny Anderson was the MVP in 81. You had Boomer was the MVP in 1988. You weren't protecting his blind side again. You went the righty-lefty combination there. But as far as Boomer, you've talked about maybe the fact that maybe he's a little bit underrated in terms of just how good he was week in and week out, and the fact that you played and were in the huddle with him for a good part of his career, prime of his career.
I agree. One of the really frustrating things for me right now is not having Kenny Anderson in the Hall of Fame. He should be in there. His stats, what he did during the era he played and when he retired. And then Boomer, I think he's very
underrated.
16 years in the NFL. Of course, he played with us, went to the Jets, went to the Cardinals, came back to the Bengals. Amazing stats, an MVP, like you mentioned, the Super Bowl. I think he's very underrated. Not only his physical performance on the field, but the guy was an amazing leader. His leadership qualities, his passion, his intensity, most of my career with 2 quarterbacks that were just really, really smart. Kenny Anderson went to law school, has his law degree. Boomer is very smart. I tell people, you could give Boomer the offensive game plan on Wednesday, bring the whole team together on Saturday morning, and Boomer could tell every one of the other 10 guys on offense who to block against every defense in every play. He was that smart.
And looking at the end of your time with the Bengals, Anthony, your contract had run out, and it looked as if you were retired. You retired and then unretired. And I suspect one of the things that factored in was suddenly there was an appreciation and maybe a little bit more of a financial motivation for the left tackle position. Suddenly it had become appreciated. It was like a great piece of art suddenly that had raised the value exponentially. And you had an opportunity, circumstances. You could just, tell us about what the circumstances were. It's kind of a perfect storm for you to give it another go in Tampa at the time.
Yeah, it's funny because, the financial gain was a little more. It wasn't like it is now, but it was a little more. But the thing was, I had retired. I had interviewed with NBC and CBS. I'd done high school football and radio for 7 years when I was playing, so that was something I wanted to get into. So I went to the Combine with Jim McNally. He wanted to just kind of show me what they did there. So I talked to Mike Brown about maybe coaching. So I'm contemplating, do I coach or do I go into broadcasting? Well, I was at the Combine, and Pete Beathard, Bobby Beathard had just left NBC and went to San Diego as a general manager. I said, Bobby, would you mind if I called you and talk to you about broadcast? I know you were in it. Now you're going back into football. I said, no problem. So about 2-3 weeks after the combine, I called and talked to his assistant. And he says, Bobby said you wanted to talk to him. I said, yeah. So his assistant answered me. He said, now, Anthony, are you really retired? And I said, yes, I'm really retired. And I said, why do you ask? He goes, well, I'll let Bobby talk to you. So I'm talking to Bobby about broadcasting. Bobby says, so are you really retired? And I said, well, Bobby, yeah, I announced my retirement. I'm down to about 250 pounds of 45, 50, and I'm checking out broadcasting. He goes, why don't you just fly out? Let's talk. I said, what do you want to talk about? He says, well, we have a left tackle, but we need a right tackle and maybe a left guard. And I said, well, I played 13 years at left tackle. My last year at Cincinnati, I played one game at left guard. All our guards were hurt, so I volunteered to play left guard. And Bernie, I said, man, this is pretty cool. You have a guy on each side of you the whole time, you're not. So I flew out to San Diego to talk to Bobby Beathard. And so we talked. Well, what happened, I flew in, and the next morning I went into his office earlier, and a reporter saw me going into his office. And he put it together. So we found out I was going out to talk to Bobby about, maybe coming back and playing. So I was getting ready to leave there, and the guy wrote an article. Well, the head coach in Tampa Bay, who I played 9 years for, Sam Weiss, calls me on my cell. He goes, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, nothing yet. He goes, don't do anything until you fly down here to Tampa. I said, okay, I'll talk to you. And then all of a sudden, Bruce Coslet's the head coach with the Jets. He calls me and goes, what are you doing? He goes, I watched you play your last couple of games. You can still play. Let's talk. I said, Bruce, nothing's happening. He goes, keep me posted. Then Marty Schottenheimer, who's now in Kansas City, calls me and says, I'm coming through Ohio. Can we talk? Well, each one of these teams had a left tackle, and they were looking for a right tackle or a left guard. So my wife and I are going, okay, what do we do? So we flew down to Tampa after our San Diego, and so I meet with Hugh Culverhouse. I meet with Sam Weiss, Rich McKay's John McKay, played it, was head coach at USC. I knew Rich. So we're getting ready to leave, and I signed a contract with Tampa Bay. And here's a couple reasons, Bernie. The same offense that I was in for 8-9 years, Sam was running down.
Sam, yep.
Bob Wiley was his line coach. Bob and Jim McNally were like this. And Bob was teaching everything that Jim taught and everything that we had done for my whole career. They had a lot of young offensive linemen down there. So I went down there. Of course, it didn't work out. Making a tackle against the Buffalo Bills, the third preseason game. I tore my shoulder up. I had it repaired. I stayed down there rehabbing for about 3 months and coaching for about 3 months. And then I came back home. I said, okay, enough's enough. It's time to move on. Then that's when Fox hired me, and I went into broadcasting. But that was the short-lived, wearing the old pink and orange with the Tampa Bay, but before they got the pewter. And yeah, so I went down there, and you mentioned the financial gain. Sure, I made some good money because I wasn't going to come out of retirement and go there as a 35-year-old NFL football player, not get anything up front. So they gave me, some good stuff up front. But it was, and I helped coach Bob Wiley when I was rehabbing. I helped on the field coach. I got my last game that I spent down there. Bob was in the press box. I was on the field with the guys with the headset, making adjustments as they ran off during the game. So that was fun. But then I went into broadcasting. So that was my short-lived Tampa Bay career.
Got to ask you about running backs, and there have been to date 8 1,000-yard rushes in the history of the Cincinnati Bengals. 6 of them while you played. You got a favorite, or are you going to get in trouble if you pick one of the running backs who was running behind you?
Well, it's amazing because they were so different. I mean, Pete Johnson was like a guard back there running the football.
Inside,
then we had Dickie Woods that had power speed. Then you had James Brooks, man. The guy could have been a wide receiver. 185, as tough as a 235-pound back. So, I mean, it's hard to pick because they're so different. If they were more evenly type of running backs, maybe I could. But they were all fun to block for, and they were all different. I mean, Harold Green, that was my last year. And he was a totally different running back. He makes the Pro Bowl my last year. And, so it was we had some great backs that I had a chance to block for, and they were really all totally different type of backs.
And they did have a time for you at halftime, December 27th, 1992. Final appearance, as it turned out, in the jungle. What do you remember about that as a culmination of your Bengal career in front of the people that came out to see you every Sunday?
I tell people, people are always asking after retirement and come back to Southern California. I said, first of all, beaches and palm trees are overrated in Southern California. But I tell people I stayed in Cincinnati because of the people. And you mentioned the jungle. I mean, the jungle was established when I was playing in the 80s. The fans were amazing. People still amazing here. So just the appreciation that was shown. And in addition to all of that, I got to mention there was a defensive player that I was playing against that was whining the whole game. And I didn't like that he was whining because he was also a Trojan. He said, just because it's your last game, stop holding me. You can't hold me because it's – and it was Dwayne Bickett. I said, Dwayne, you remember Dwayne Bickett, the big outside linebacker?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not holding you. So finally I said, Dwayne, if you're going to just give me your chest, I'm going to take it. I'm not going to turn down charity. But, the fans there were amazing. 57,000 seasons, but it was still sold out and still packed. And it's funny because I have a foundation. I do a lot of speaking with young people, and I get a question asked to me a lot. And, Bernie, the question they asked me is, do you wish you would have played in the jungle when you were playing? And I said, well, let me just give you a little history lesson. So I get a chance to tell these young kids about the jungle, how it was established in the 80s when I was playing.
I know you're very close, remain close to the Bengals, and you wear your stripes with pride. The Bengals franchise, I mean, an enigma wrapped up in a question, wrapped up into a riddle at this point. You had 4 playoff appearances. You had 3 AFC Central championships, the 2 Super Bowl appearances. And now here the Bengals are, the last, and I'm sure it crosses your mind from time to time, the 1991 wild card victory over Houston. You lost to Oakland in the divisional playoff the next week. That stands as the last playoff victory for this franchise. And there's been some pretty good players that have played for this franchise, and there's been a half a dozen first-round playoff losses. It's almost a curse unto itself here that has not yet to be broken.
Yeah, that's a shame that that I was playing for the last playoff game because that was a long time ago. But the thing that's sad is, I mean, you mentioned the 6 playoff first round, but you look at those 5-6 years where they had 10+ wins. I mean, with Andy Dalton and they had some really good seasons with Marvin. After that long spell of 18-19 years of really a drought, and then Marvin gets here and they have all these playoff appearances, but of course the knock is that there's not a playoff win. So, that's, as a former player and a fan now and a member of this great community, that's what we're all waiting for, is that first playoff game. And hopefully now, I don't know what's going to happen this year, but I think with Zach Taylor there, the moves they made in free agency this offseason and the draft day culture, when you look at just about all the free agents they signed, they all have playoff experience. 6 of the 7 draft picks were college captains. One of them was a 3-time captain. Higgins, who left after his junior year at Clemson. I was talking to a coach who's really close friends with his position coach at Clemson, said if he comes back for his senior year, he's probably going to be a captain. So I think there's a culture of who they're drafting, who they're signing. So hopefully it translates not only into playoff appearances, but some playoff wins.
And the final point on your playing career, once again, remiss if I didn't mention, I know what great pride, I'm sure what great pride you take. There was a play in the playbook that was Munoz eligible. And you milked that pretty good during your career, and you got a pretty good highlight reel that's assembled. How much fun was that? The Fridge had his moment for the Bears. You had more than a couple of moments as a Bengal, right from the first one that you ever made. The first touchdown catch that you ever made was pretty important against the Browns, big divisional rivalry game.
Exactly. We can look at the catches, Bernie, but let's not mention the yards per catch, okay? It's because I think it would be translated into feet per catch, not yards per catch. But no, it was, it started with Sam Weiss, his rookie year as a coach, Boomer. We put it into the game plan. I thought it would never be used. And it was, we're up in Cleveland, we're down 17-10. All they have to do is punt the ball. There's like 42 seconds left. We have no timeouts. And we take it down, and we get a pass interference call. We're first and goal at the 1, and he calls the play where I'm the primary receiver. What is that rookie coach doing? Does he want to lose his job right away? It didn't work exactly how we drew it up, but it was muddy. I fell. The defense started to go that way, and Boomer stopped and kind of threw me a little sidearm pitch. But you know what? It was one of those things. I catch it. We score, we kick the extra point, we go into overtime, and Jim Breach kicks the field goal to win. But you're right, against a divisional team, an interstate team, and a Cleveland Browns, people, when I'm out speaking, they say, share some most memorable moments of your NFL career? They're thinking Super Bowl, Pro Bowls. And I basically start out by saying, as a former lineman, I got to say the first touchdown catch, because a lineman usually doesn't get to catch passes, and it's against the Cleveland Browns. So
Yeah.
I ended up catching 4 touchdowns, which was unbelievable. It was fun. And so I thank Sam Weiss, and I thank Boomer Esiason for taking a little bit of the velocity off of it when he threw it to me.
And an occupational hazard of 13 years. I can't quite compete with you. I'm just going to show you. That's my left pinky, Anthony. And that was courtesy of a foul ball on July 4th, 2012 at Fenway Park off the bat of Adrian Gonzalez, who was a little late getting around. So that's how my left pinky ended up this way. Your left pinky is at a little bit of a different angle, if you will.
Yeah, it's just a little bit. You know what, Bernie, it doesn't hurt. I don't need another surgery and pins, and so I'm just gonna, plus I can use it as an excuse on the golf course. I can get a couple of strokes because, all fingers don't go the right way. So it's kind of a hazard of the profession.
Your career ended up in Canton and the Gold Jacket in 1998 as the second Hispanic member of the Hall of Fame. What are your recollections about when the call came and the experience? And you also had, I was really moved by the fact that you had your son to present you at the Hall of Fame, which must have been really special for you to share that moment, but to share it on that level.
It was really exciting. Couple of things. So I grew up in Southern California. I played college ball there, played in Cincinnati, but the Super Bowl was actually in San Diego the year I became eligible. So that's the city back in California that I actually received the call. Dave Motz was the head of marketing there, and he called me and said, "Anthony, are you superstitious?" I said, "Nope, not at all." He says, "I checked the previous year, but the individuals wanted nothing to do with it. I'm going to ask you a question." He says, "We have this room where all the selectors are in, and when they come up with their guys, they come to the podium and then they read their names off." He said, "If you're not superstitious, would you mind hanging out in a room in the back, where these guys are making the selections, and then if your name is called, you just come out and you come to the podium and you're there in front of everybody." I said, "Dave," I said, "you're right. I'm not superstitious. I will do that under one condition." He goes, "What's that?" I said, "That from this room, there is a back call. I can exit the back door through the alley and back to our hotel." He goes, "No problem." So I was actually in a back room when my name was announced. And after I called Dee Dee, my wife, and told her, I came out to face the media, but it was unbelievable. I mean, to get that, word right there. And I joked with Dave Motz, who retired a couple years ago after 40 plus years at the Hall. I said, "Dave, I think we were in a broom closet that year. Now they have a green room for guys with food and drinks and big chairs." But that's how I got word, Bernie, is I was there in a little room in the back. And when the selectors came up with the class of 1998, my name was announced, and I was able to come out and face the media and give a word or two. So it was, I still pinch myself 22 years later. I still, being able to wear that gold jacket in the ring and being able to drive up to Canton we'll continue next year. Of course, it would have been just this past weekend. It's always a great time to be with all the guys.
Beyond the field, Anthony, I know you had, I guess it was somewhat of an epiphany at the beginning of your second season, in particular about how you were going to dedicate your life. I mean, that's a major moment if people that do have those moments in their life. And that is carried over into a remarkable record of philanthropy and charitable support. Your foundation, the Anthony Munoz Foundation, was founded in 2002. I'm going to let you talk about it, because when I looked at just how extensive and expansive it is in terms of all the good it does in so many different areas, I think it'd be tougher to talk about the things that you're not doing and the groups of people that you're not helping than the groups of people that you are helping. It's remarkable.
I got to get back to your initial comment about my second year in the league. And, my faith started to grow as a sophomore in college, both my wife and I. But it wasn't until my second year where this tagline really became a great tagline and something that I started to understand when I say victory beyond competition.
Yes.
So I was competing on the field, but I needed victory beyond that competition, victory beyond the wins and losses, the blocks and no blocks. And that was through my faith. That's the victory. And that's really been the motivator for me for the last 43 years. And that's really what spawned my foundation. And I really didn't start until 8 years after I retired, because when I was playing, I understand leverage, relevance of being an NFL football player, but being a husband, being a father, and having to produce on the football field, I was not going to have the time to be engaged in the foundation. So I started in 2002 when both my kids were like sophomore, juniors in college. Mission statement of really engaging the tri-state area to impact kids mentally, physically, and spiritually. And here we're going into our 20th year next year, and we have 7 programs. So we probably worked with 40,000 kids in the last 19 years. And we start out with elementary kids, and we have a mentoring program, one-on-one mentoring with about 30 kids for the whole year. And every program we have, we might offer us a different program to the kids, but we build relationships with them. We say once you enter into an AMF or an Anthony Munoz Foundation program, you become a family member. So we're really going to pour into your life. So we have this mentoring program for K to 5 kids. Once a week during the whole school year. We do other things like take them to the zoo, maybe some Reds games, do some stuff with them, Christmas parties for their whole family. And then they age out at 5th grade. So from 6th to middle school, we have what we call, so we continue with the middle school kids. We take them to local colleges. We take them to local companies. We mentor them to let them see after middle school, go to high school with the vision of moving on to a trade school, to a college, and continuing to study. And then, so that's a couple of our programs. Then we have what we call our overnight character camps. We have one in the spring, which is pretty diverse, 150 young men. We take them away for 3 days. We teach them a little football. We're going to do that. But we teach them a lot of character, team building, and how to work together. I mean, with the landscape of today, as you know, with everything going on racially, we've been doing this for 20 years, teaching black kids, brown kids, white kids to work together, to respect each other, to learn each other's culture. I've been doing that for 20 years, 25 years. And then we have another one in the spring or in the fall, this exact same template, but it's 100% Hispanic kids. Teach them the same thing: football, character, team building, and how to respect each other. So that's another program. Then we have what we call our youth leadership seminar. We try to get anywhere from 80 to 100 high schools together for a full day event. We have motivational leadership speakers. We have breakout sessions during the day to have, let's hear what these high school kids have to say, what they're hearing from these speeches. And then at the end of the day, we have what we call our community service challenge. We really give them a charge, and these students that are there put together community service projects. We track them. I pick a couple winners, but it's amazing what these young men and women will initiate. They have their moderators, their teachers, their counselors that come with them, but these kids put them in. There are a lot of sustainable programs that they're doing. Then we have 2 types of scholarships. In the spring, we have what we call our straight A scholarship. It encompasses A's, athletics, and a big criteria is overcoming adversity. We have a dinner or a lunch at one of the nicest steakhouses in town, Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. He totally donates it. We have all 18. We have 9 male and 9 female finalists. They get to bring their most influential teacher. They bring their parents. We have about 130 at a luncheon, and it's a $2,000 to $5,000 one-time scholarship that we give them for these kids going to college. We give them a nice foundation ring, and then the female winner gets a nice medallion. So that's one of the scholarships. Then at our dinner in the summertime, we give away anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000, $20,000 scholarships, depending on budget. We're starting to partner with companies, universities to increase that. So that's our scholarship fund. So that's what we do. Like I said, about 40,000 young people we've been able to,
wow,
19 going on 20 years. It's a passion of mine. I'm there when I'm in town. I'm there every day. I don't take a penny from the foundation. We have a great board, a very engaged board, 16 board members that are amazing. Right now we have 2 full-time staff, which is really lean for what we do. But from the beginning, we've always had a local college internship program. We'll have 4 to 10 local college students that intern with us, and they get to learn the non-for-profit business because with our lean staff, they come in and they have projects, they work. We usually have 1 or 2 graphic designers that helps us with our logos for our camps, our events, and that's what we do. Like I said, going on 20 years, we've raised probably close to $16 million.
Wow.
And every year during our audit, and it's happened for years and years, as you probably know, one question they always ask you when you have a non-for-profit, 9 to 91 cents just about every year per the dollar that goes to our kids in the program. So that's what we do. And like I said, started it, it'll be 20 years this next year. So we plan on really having a big party celebrating the kids this next
20th?
year, 20th.
And long may it run for another 20, God willing, and beyond with
That's right.
With what you've established. You mentioned your kids. You had both your kids Division I athletes. I remember Michael as an offensive tackle at Tennessee. Your daughter played at Tennessee and then transferred to Ohio State. You're a young man. You got 11 grandkids? Holy cow.
Actually 9, yeah. But, yeah, we still call our daughter the best athlete. I think we've all conceded that. She could shoot lights out. She was a 2-time Miss Basketball in Ohio, 2-time Division I Player of the Year. And Michael he was the number 1 lineman coming out.
Yeah.
Could have gone anywhere. We had him at Tennessee at least for 1 year together. Michael was there, for his freshman, sophomore year. Michelle was there for her freshman year. So then she came to Ohio State, made it a lot easier for us to drive around to all her games. But so they had unbelievable careers. They both, finished school, got their masters. Michelle, finished undergraduate, went into education, taught for a few years. Now she's homeschooling her kids, which is a full-time job. Michael didn't go on to the NFL, but he had a great career there. Got the postgraduate scholarship, which is now it's called the Campbell Award, the academic Heisman. When he wasn't drafted, decided to go get his MBA, worked at Procter & Gamble for about 6 years, and now he's been up in Kent working at the Hall of Fame for 2 years. So, 9 grandkids, 5 boys, 4 girls, and so it's a lot of fun. So we got to keep active to stay up with all those.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw. I'm sorry about the 11. I didn't want to scare you. I didn't have any inside knowledge on that, but nine's a pretty formidable number.
We didn't know.
Exactly. You've taken the Bible literally. Go forth and multiply, Anthony.
Exactly. They got their quivers full there.
with this next generation, I always try to make the guests feel at home. So I want you to know that.
Love it. I love it.
I covered the series for the Creative Sports Network. It was down at Georgia Tech. I can't believe 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it was a big win for SC to come across the Mississippi. And they ended up in the Super Regional 2 out of 3. They knocked off Georgia Tech, who was led by a guy named Mark Teixeira. And they beat him 2 straight. Yeah. And USC had a guy named Mark Pryor on the mound who wasn't bad. So I really enjoyed covering that series.
I remember Mark. Yep. I love, college baseball. I love it. And, I still, like you said, I go to Reds games. I got to go to Fenway Park. That's got to be somewhere that I got to go to. Of course, we've had a few SC guys play there. So,
absolutely.
We talked baseball real quick. My recruiting trip into SC the weekend,
yep.
It's a football recruiting trip. So Friday I get in, I'm with the football people. Saturday morning, I'm sitting on the bench at Dado Field with the USC alumni baseball game against Major League All-Stars. So Kingman, Seaver, Dower, Freddie Lynn, they're all sitting there.
Wow.
And so that's Saturday morning. Then Saturday night, I'm with football. Sunday morning, there was a tradition. The USC varsity would play the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium, and then the Dodgers would head to Vero Beach for spring break. So I'm sitting on the bench with the SC baseball team at Dodger Stadium as they're playing in an exhibition game. So that was my recruiting trip to USC.
Wow. There's some star power there, no question. Tough to say no under those circumstances.
Exactly.
Indeed. Well, consider it done for Fenway, Anthony. And once again, Sam White said the greatest offensive tackle the game has ever known. And Bob Trumpy gave you the ultimate compliment. He said he was the same guy and played at the same level from the beginning to the end of his career. And Chris Collingsworth, your friend, said there is nobody, and this was when they gave the NFL, when they evaluated the top 100 of the 100 years, there's nobody on the list that he said he would trade for. Wow. That was high praise indeed from Chris Collingsworth, and certainly deservedly. And great to have you with us here today. I took French in high school. I did a little study, though. Munoz, son of Hill. I'm going to go out on a limb, if you will, on the hill and say that the guy that we had on today, Anthony Munoz, the son of Hill, has scaled a mountain in your life, both on the field and now with everything that you've done philanthropically, all your charitable endeavors for the past 20 years, and long may it run, Anthony. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Bernie, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me. It's been fun. It's been fun, and thank you. Thank you so much for the kind words.
Indeed. Thank you so much. And thank you to Anthony Munoz, our guest here. He certainly played well, as we suspected, on the Games People Play. And we want to thank the Fours once again, and everybody here with Peter Colton as our host, our executive producer, Andy Bernstein, the crew back in Seattle for Todd and Kiwan, and thanks to all of them. And it was really a pleasure to talk to, once again, the greatest of all time on the offensive line at the tackle position in the NFL. Our guest today on the Games People Play. We played with Anthony Munoz. So for the Games People Play, this is Bernie Corbett saying, play the game well, everyone.